Hey, what's happening, y'all, man? The front office looks completely different from what it looked like this time last year. And with a lot of those important guys that's in the front office between Ron Rivera and Jason Wright that have been brought in, mainly Ron Rivera's side, concerning this video with Marty Hurney, Martin Mayhew, and Chris Polian, a lot of these guys are each individually going to have a big say in what free agents we bring in, what players we draft, what players we may trade for. So I want to dive into what each new hire may want to bring in as free agents or impossible trades. And then at the very end, I mean, Rivera, Scott Turner, and Del Rio together may want to bring some guys that they weren't able to bring the previous offseason when those guys were still in their contracts. So let's get to it, man. Let's get it. Alright, so Martin Mayhew had a big role in creating the Lions and the 49ers over the past few years. So I wouldn't be surprised if Martin Mayhew, my number one candidate for him is to possibly have good ties in bringing in Larry Warford. He's the one that drafted Larry Warford to Detroit. He ended up in New Orleans where he became a Pro Bowler back to back to back. And the Saints released him the previous offseason, the 2020 offseason. And then he also opted out before the season started. So a lot of people forget that he exists, but I mean, he's one of the best guards in the NFL, and he's just out there. This is a free agent. So I'm assuming that Martin Mayhew may vouch to try to go get a Larry Warford. It's crazy because even though he's one of the best guards in the NFL in my opinion, and he's not even old, he's 29 years old, it was reported that he was only asking for $7 million before he opted out. So I mean, I'm willing to give him $10 million a year if that's what he wants, to be one of the best guards in the NFL. To go opposite of Brandon Sheriff, Chase Roulier holding it down at the center position. Now you have one of the best interior offensive lines in the NFL, and Wes Schweitzer will be one of the best backup guards in the NFL because we've clearly seen that he's a good starter. So him coming off the bench is crazy. So I think this Larry Warford thing for $10 million or less a year, you gotta do that. Now that's one of my big priorities in free agency. Also with Martin Mayhew, you never know, Trent Williams, him and Kyle Shanahan played large roles in bringing Trent Williams from Washington to the 49ers, and Trent Williams has clearly shown that he's not willing to re-sign with the 49ers, at least for the amount of money that they have offered him. You never know, he may want to come back here. Now, if he wants big time money, nah, I'm good. But if he's willing to take some sort of a discount to be on a possibly Super Bowl contending team, and just because Martin Mayhew's over here, Ron Rivera's over here, it's an entirely new culture, it's his old team with a lot of his best friends like Morgan Moses, maybe he'd be willing to take a cheaper contract. Doubt it, so don't expect us to get Trent Williams. And again, I don't want Trent Williams if he's trying to go for big time money. He's a big time tackle, but I'm not willing to give him big time money. Speaking of the 49ers, staying with them, Mike McGlinchey, one of those good tackles out there, may be available via trade. I mean, I don't think the 49ers have him on the trade block, but you never know. Martin Mayhew can make some calls. He's a pretty solid tackle. I believe he may be a little bit better than anybody else we have on this roster. And I like Cornelius Lucas. I like Cornelius Lucas starting the left tackle. I like Morgan Moses starting the right tackle. I think that's a pretty solid offensive line. Pro Football Focus rates it a top 7, I believe, top 5 offensive line in the NFL. I wouldn't go that far, but I definitely think if we don't add any offensive line pieces this offseason, we'll be straight. But it would be nice to go and get somebody like a Mike McGlinchey that would make Cornelius Lucas one of the best backup tackles in the NFL, just like getting Larry Warford would make Wes Schweitzer one of the best backup guards in the NFL. Just crazy depth. And he's only a $6 million cap hit this year, which is ridiculous value for how good he is. And then, I mean, you're going to have to pay him more than that per year when you have to re-sign him, because this is the last year of his contract going into 2021. He's not a free agent. That's why you have to trade for him. But I still think the move may be worth it. And I definitely like that move more than signing Russell Okung in free agency, which we're going to talk about later once we get to Marty Hurney. Now, with Kendall Fuller and Ronald Darby, we still need to re-sign Ronald Darby, but I think it will happen. I'm just assuming it will happen. I still think we need to get more athletic at the cornerback position. Kendall Fuller and Ronald Darby are good corners, but when teams attack them with more athletic receivers, with very dynamic, elite athleticism receivers, they get ate up. There's nothing they can really do, especially when our pass rush isn't getting there. I mean, perfect example is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game in the playoffs. They just couldn't do anything with Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. Those are just some of the top receivers as far as athleticism and skill goes. And then they can hold their own for a little while, and they're good at keeping things in front of them, but they get beat deep, especially just like in that game, we weren't getting as much pressure as our defensive line normally gets, so they were just out there on the island getting exposed. And to go and get somebody like a Jason Verrett, has strong ties to Martin Mayhew, I think that would be a pretty solid move, especially you can get it from cheap, because, I mean, he hasn't been a top corner in the NFL since 2015. Back in 2015, he was one of the better corners of the NFL, arguably top 10. And his main problem these past few years is that he hasn't been able to stay healthy, but last year, he stayed relatively healthy and had a pretty decent bounce back year. I think he can get even better with an even better pass rush in front of him. And also, more importantly for us, I think he could be a very cheap risk to take with a high ceiling. You're not paying him much money, I say go get him. And again, he's a free agent, so you don't even have to trade for him. Also, and I highly doubt this happened, highly doubt this happened, but we have a big need at linebacker, and Martin Mayhew has strong ties to Fred Warner in San Francisco. And if you can get him, be fantastic, but I doubt he goes for anything less than a first, probably even more than that. But Fred Warner, top 5 linebacker in the NFL, arguably top 3, would be a huge get, but I just highly doubt that it makes any sense on either side for that trade to happen. Right now, he's on a ridiculously cheap contract, but it would take a lot of value to trade for him. I mean, at least a first round pick, and you're going to have to extend him, so that really cheap contract he's on right now may not even last. You may end up extending him immediately before even the 2021 season happens, and now he's making way more than that $1.2 million cap hit he's worth. I mean, that's ridiculous value. I don't even see why the 49ers would even be willing to trade away value that great. Top 3 linebacker getting paid only $1.2 million this year. That's ridiculous. Come on now. But it's just a name to keep track of, man. Martin Mayhew has strong ties to these guys at positions of need. You never know. Again, the Trent Williams and Fred Warner things are very highly unlikely, but you never know, man. Moving on to Marty Hurney, Curtis Samuel makes too much sense. We have a need of a wide receiver too. Ron Rivera and Scott Turner have strong ties to him, especially Scott Turner. Loved him in his offense. So Curtis Samuel makes all of the sense in the world, and right now Spot Track has him at a market value of maybe $12.4 million a year, which is a pretty good deal for how much he'll be utilized in this offense. I mean, he'll be given the ball like a running back out of the backfield on sweeps. He'll be the number 2 guy. He'll always be open because he's a pretty good receiver, and also Terry McLaurin on the other side. It's going to be the one demanding double teams and taking all of the attention of the defense, and opposing defensive coordinators are going to be like, how do we stop Terry McLaurin, which will allow Curtis Samuel to eat on the other side game after game. I think that's a great move. Me personally, I prefer Corey Davis as a wide receiver to a free agency, but Curtis Samuel makes all of the sense in the world. Mostly because of the ties of Scott Turner, Marty Hurney, and Ron Rivera. You might as well just go ahead and write up Curtis Samuel as a 2021 Washington free agent signing. It just seems like it's meant to happen. Also, let's talk about quarterback Cam Newton. Now, he's my favorite football player in the history of ever, but even I don't really want him. But it would make sense with us needing a quarterback and with us having the 19th pick, and it may take too much value to trade up into the top 10, top 5. We've seen in history it hasn't, but there are a lot of QB needy teams, so it may require more to trade up into the top 5, top 10 this year than other years, just because of that fact that everybody's looking for a quarterback as of right now. So getting to Cam Newton this year and seeing what he can do, especially, I mean, he played for a veteran minimum with the Patriots. He didn't have a great year, so he would more than likely end up coming over here on a veteran minimum, making less than Taylor Heineke, so him and Taylor Heineke compete for the starting job, and then maybe you worry about drafting an elite quarterback next season. I don't know. Again, that's not my favorite solution. My favorite solution is to trade up for a quarterback, go get a Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, or Justin Fields, but Cam Newton is an option, honestly, just based off of the ties of Marty Hurney, Scott Turner, and Ron Rivera. Same thing with Teddy Bridgewater. Similar situation. Possibly bring him in for cheap to be a bridge quarterback. Worry about drafting a quarterback next year's draft, the 2022 draft, or whatever. Let him compete with Taylor Heineke for the starting job. See what happens. Again, not my ideal scenario, but very possible, mostly because Marty Hurney's the one that brought Teddy Bridgewater to the Panthers, and it's clear that the Panthers want their guy. Teddy Bridgewater is not their guy. I mean, the Panthers are even willing to trade up in the first round, it seems, to take their guy, so Teddy Bridgewater's pretty much out of there. Then at tackle, you have Russell Okung, and Marty Hurney traded for Okung as a general manager for the Panthers last year. And now that he's the executive vice president of football and player personnel for this team, you never know. With a cheap option like Russell Okung, it may be possible. He was only a $13 million cap hit last season. I'm estimating him to make even less money than that going forward, mostly because he's 32 years old, and also he just hasn't been a great tackle, but he would be a nice depth piece. I wouldn't assume he's going to start over Cornelius Lucas or Morgan Moses, but maybe he's a pretty decent depth piece. But He played just over 650 snaps over the last couple of years for the Chargers and the Panthers. And at best, you could say he was probably average. And Pro Football Focus ranked him the 46th out of 90 qualifying tackles last season. So, I mean, he's not just this flashy get, but you never know. Maybe he can revive his career here for cheap. Again, I only want Russell Okung if he's coming for cheap. I don't want to pay him big money. If he's asking for more than what he made last year, $13 million, I don't want him. I'm sorry. He's not worth more than that. At that point, just go get Orlando Brown and pay him more money. At least you know for a fact he's going to be good. And bring Pro Bowl level talent. Also, we have a needed safety, free safety specifically. Maybe trade Boston via trade. He's a very cheap contract, relatively aging player. Ron Rivera and Marty Hurney seem to keep giving him chances. So you never know. Maybe Ron Rivera reaches in his bag and makes a trade for Trey Boston. Maybe like a 3rd round pick or later. I don't know. I don't want to give up too much value for Trey Boston because I feel like Jeremy Reeves and DeShazer Everett are decent. And Jeremy Reeves has room to grow, so you never know. But Trey Boston would be an immediate upgrade over both of them as far as free safety play goes. Maybe not as a tackler, of course, but like as a rangy free safety, as a single high guy that could just be back there by himself. Trey Boston definitely brings more to the table than DeShazer Everett and Jeremy Reeves. But again, if the Panthers are asking for crazy value, don't even think about it. It's not worth it. We'll figure it out. We'll draft some guy later in the draft or bring in an elite guy like a Justin Simmons or Anthony Harris. Even though that would be too much money tied up to the safety position with Landon Collins already being a $15 million cap hit. Man, if we can find a way to move off a Landon Collins contract, bro. Dang. We also have a need for tight end too. And, hey, Greg Olsen's out there. Could possibly be very cheap. And, again, Logan Thomas is already our #1 tight end. We've clearly seen that. And to bring Greg Olsen in, who Ron Rivera and Scott Turner have experience with working into their offenses for very cheap, nice little veteran presence, I say why not? Nice dual threat tight end. And, again, emphasis on very cheap. He's aging. And he didn't have a great season with the Seahawks last season, so he has to know he's going for cheap. He may go get a job in a booth or something, working as like a analyst or something, but we'll see. And then also, Marty Hurney could bring in possibly Chris Reed. He's a free agent guard from the Panthers. Not great, but a decent depth piece. You know, I think he's better than Wes Martin, which isn't saying much, but you know what I'm saying? If he's going for cheap and you can replace Wes Martin just to have better depth in the offensive line, then hey, I say do it. Moving on to Chris Polian. The main thing that Chris Polian could probably come over here and make happen is a possible Gardner Minshew trade. Quarterback from the Jaguars. Now, I'm not a big fan of Gardner Minshew, but it would be interesting to bring him in to compete with Taylor Heineke. But with him being a quarterback, being an ex-starting quarterback, trading for him, they're probably going to be asking for way more value than I'm willing to give up. So I don't think this will happen. I really don't want it to happen. But hey, Chris Polian does have strong ties to Gardner Minshew. The Jaguars clearly want to move on from him. You never know. Also, speaking of the tackle position, Cam Robinson, he's a free agent. One of Chris Polian's guys. You never know. We may bring him in, take a look at him. He may be going for very cheap. Because even though he's arguably more physically gifted and talented than Russell Okung did have a slightly better season than Cam Robinson last year. Cam Robinson just hasn't been very good lately. From the very little that I've watched him. I haven't watched him a lot, honestly, but from the very little that I've watched, Cam Robinson is just not playing at the potential that we thought he had coming out of the draft when he was drafted. So, you never know. Bring in Cam Robinson for very cheap and try to see if you can revive his career here. Also, another corner out there, AJ Bouier. Now, he's been to different teams since he was with the Jaguars, but it's still one of Chris Polian's guys. Never know, bringing in AJ Bouier for, again, very cheap. Only for very cheap. If he's asking for a lot of money, of course not. We'll figure it out through the draft or whatever. But AJ Bouier is a name to watch. And then another one in the realm of more than likely won't ever happen, Myles Jack. We have a needed linebacker. He's still a very talented, young, freakishly athletic linebacker. You never know. Via trade, his cap hit for the next 3 seasons stand at $12.15 million, $13.15 million, and $13.9 million. He still has 3 more years in his contract. And that would be quite a bit of money for an off-ball linebacker. But his talent is probably worth it. Now, I mean, paying him all of that money and having to trade for him is what makes this, like, nearly impossible to happen, because that's just a lot to give up for a linebacker when you can go and get Levante David, who gives you better production, and you don't have to trade for him. You may have to pay him more than that, maybe even not. But Levante David is potentially be a free agent if the Buccaneers don't pay him big money or they don't franchise tag him. So it would just be easier to go and get a Levante David who's a more surefire thing, and you don't have to give up value to trade for him. But Myles Jack is a Chris Polian guy. So, again, one of those things, I'm just throwing the name out there. I don't think Miles Jack, Gardner Minshew, Trey Boston, Trent Williams, Fred Warner, or even Mike McGlinchey happen, mostly because you have to trade for these guys, but you never know. Just throwing the names out there. And then, of course, with Rivera and Scott Turner, Cam Newton, Curtis Samuel, and a sleeper, running back Mike Davis filled in nicely for Christian McCaffrey last season. Definitely a Scott Turner guy. Definitely keep his name in mind, considering who we may bring in through free agency. Him as like our third running back will be excellent. I mean, I had him in my fantasy leagues. He was saving some of my leagues. It was almost as if they didn't miss a step with Christian McCaffrey gone. Now, of course, Christian McCaffrey is clearly a better running back, and their offense ran better with Christian McCaffrey in rather than Mike Davis starting. But it wasn't just like this huge drop-off. And to have Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic and Mike Davis as your third option, potentially the best running back group in the NFL, honestly. And I'm not exactly sure how much money he's demanding out here, so we'll have to see. But yeah, man, those are just some of the notable names that we may want to keep an eye out for. I mean, a lot of them may not be the shiny, home run hidden free agents that we want, but these guys have ties to some of these new hires we have made. And so don't be surprised if you just wake up one morning and see that we have signed Curtis Samuel to a 3-year, $12 million a year deal. You know what I'm saying? Don't be surprised if Greg Olsen out of nowhere, 1 year, $3 million deal. Don't be surprised you see AJ Bouier signed to a cheap 1 year prove it deal. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Boy, I would be ecstatic if we end up with Larry Warford on a nice little 4-year deal, paying him about $13 million a year, maybe something like that. Again, these are all just hypotheticals. These are just names that these new hires are attached to. They drafted these guys, they brought them in as free agents, they traded for them to their previous teams. So that's why I'm saying don't be surprised if they try to bring them to this team. They all have important voices in the front office. At the end of the day, Ron Rivera is the head honcho, so it won't happen unless he wants it to happen. But I really feel like a lot of these guys will voice their opinions on some of their guys that they believe in, the reason that they drafted, signed them, or traded for them. So again, don't be surprised if you see some of these names being brought up in free agency. Don't be surprised if we end up signing maybe 3 of these guys I named throughout this video, maybe trading for 1 or 2 of them, you know what I'm saying? But man, that's the end of this video, man. Please like this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. Please subscribe if you haven't. Definitely hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get a notification every time I release a video like this one. And of course, get in the comment section and let me know any players that I may have missed that Chris Polian, Martin Mayhew, and Marty Hurney may have previous history with and may want to bring to the Washington football team to help mold the team to their vision and how a team should be built. Because I probably missed some guys out there. I tried my best, you know what I'm saying? I tried to dig deep, but let me know if I missed anybody you think they may want to bring over. That makes logical sense, especially at positions of need. And as always, man, I really appreciate all of the support that y'all give, man. Appreciate everybody that pulls up to every video and likes it, binge watching all the videos, pulling up to all the live streams, man. Shouts out to everybody that gives to the channel, everybody that donates. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose names you see scrolling on the screen right now, man. I really appreciate all of y'all. I'll catch y'all later. I'm out, man.